Today we are recording episode 113, I believe, on the Localization Fireside Chat. I'm honored to be joined by Don DePalma, Chief Strategy Officer for CSA, research firm in our industry that everybody knows about. Everybody is familiar with CSA Research. There are several research industry companies in the localization market, but CSA is what started it all, I guess. Don and I, we agreed to that years ago. Don, welcome to the conversation. I know we did a bit of a dry run yesterday. I really enjoyed our dry run. Hopefully we can replicate that from yesterday.
Thank you for having me, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So Don, how's it going? How's life treating
you? Life is pretty good, except for, let's say, externalities beyond which I have no control. So
that's right. We can control what we control, and we worry about what we control, right?
No. We could have a long conversation sometime over the externalities. So
that's right. That's right. There's many of them. Don, let's get the conversation started. I mean, there are a lot of conversation going on in the industry, and that's the purpose. I want to have a conversation with you. And to the audience, once in a while, Don and I, we have these conversations. Sometimes we record them, sometimes we don't. But this time we're recording them. And I'd like to get like a pulse check on where we are right now. I mean, we've done this about a year ago. I think that's sort of like a yearly thing you and I now are doing. And where are we now in terms of your scan of the market? So from where you stand as a CSA strategy, what do you see in the marketplace? Technology, people, economy. Where are we? Where are we now?
Yeah. Well, I've long looked at this market in terms of its role in society and in government and everyday lives. And the one thing that you cannot do is separate, we'll call it the language sector, but more broadly, we call it the global content sector, from what's happening around us. So, this is something, it's a function that requires people, process, technology. All of that in itself requires investment and investors and people interested in doing it, and a supply chain of people. And all of those things have been disrupted over the last, let's say, several months. And that's been, in general, a major factor in what we keep seeing in the market, which is uncertainty. Companies are unsure about what they're going to do next. It's not just about the language sector. It's about everything. Should we invest here? Should we invest in this function or that function, or just wait things out? And so everything that's been on the table over time is right now still on the table. And so the effect here in the industry is we've seen it slow down. We've seen a lot of concern about things that are happening. And of course, we've got one of those major internal factors, which is changing technologies. So AI has had an enormous effect on the industry. We started tracking it closely as AI a few years ago. Before that, we were treating it as something that was on the horizon. But it became democratized and fully a force in this sector. So
Don, from your perspective, it sounds like there is a wait and see kind of notion going on right now. At least the feeling that you're giving me from this conversation.
Yeah, and I'd like to know if you're feeling it as well in your sector and in your backyard. But that's the general feeling that I'm getting from just about everybody that I talk to. Mm-hmm. And in any industry. Some, of course, are much more, let's say, upbeat. If you happen to be on the right side of whatever's trending now. Yeah.
No, I feel like, this industry is a typical service industry. Like, you respond to need from a customer, from a market, from whoever, right? So as long as the need is there, the industry is thriving. But if, as you said earlier, the genie's out of the bottle, the toothpaste is out and out of the tube. And now what we have is a aware customer who is, to a large extent, effectively using the technologies at their disposal. And that has to have some sort of remedy. Now, the flip side of the equation here are saying, like, the same technology that is doing the translation, it's also creating content. But I don't know where you read at. Is like the increase in content, is it making a dent? Is it equivalent now? It would equalize the industry from a language perspective.
Well, from a language perspective now, arguably you can create content in any language that you want. And one of the things that we've talked about in the past is you're starting with English, typically, in many cases, is the dominant language in commerce for decades. And now we've got Chinese, of course, which is a major force in the market. So let's say you've got those two forces plus the European Union, the country, all of the languages that are spoken there. In total, there's about 17 languages that really matter. From our research, because it's global revenue forecaster, and those come up at top, generating the largest share of the industry's revenue. And at the end of the day, what you've got is this reality that with large language models, you can create in many of those languages directly. You could just go from, write me something about this, and we've seen and heard some people talk about creating directly in those languages rather than translating into them. And I myself, I've talked about, going from an intent-based approach. Here are the things I want to say, and say it in a way that makes sense in those languages. And that's one of the things that you could potentially do with this. We can get to the downsides of doing it that way in a second, but that's the possibility. And one of the challenges here with all that uncertainty is that you've got executives out there, you've got investors in companies, shareholders are saying, well, if we can just generate it in those languages, let's just ram it out in those languages, and then we don't have to worry about those translators or translation management systems, or it's just happening.
And there's a pros and cons to everything in life, I guess.
Yeah.
In this case too, I mean, there are the convenience and the cost cutting part that everybody seems to be drawn to. And like in the transition industry, not specifically in any geography, in all geographies, you're one scandal away from going back to the traditional, or to put a little bit more scrutiny, not traditional, but put a little bit more scrutiny on what you're producing, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering about this scandal here. So
yeah, we don't know. I mean, generally speaking, like if you're a reputable company, you're using these types of techniques and tactics in terms of taking your content into another language. You may be subject to media scrutiny if you do something wrong. You may be writing a contract that is going to end up being faulty, and because of the convenience part, and you did not really scrutinize the content.
Yeah.
If you're a pharmaceutical company, you may doing an advice on a drug that probably going to hurt somebody. It's got some health and safety issues to it.
Yeah. No, certainly. And I was just wondering if you had a reference to something that happened in the last 24 hours that I missed in the news. So, okay. I'm actually cleaning out my files, going through paper and scanning stuff that matters. And one of the things I found was a Boston Globe article about Lernout and Houseby. When that financial operation melted down, and the president of the company being led away in shackles in a suburb of Boston by federal agency. So we're not seeing anything like that, but we are seeing something like I just saw something recently about Apple, for want of a comma in the right place, incurred a huge fine in the European Union as a result of that. So there are some massive mistakes that can be made, and massive mistakes in general. It's a function of the scale of what's going on here. So anything that you do right or wrong is you do it in the wrong way. Like in a couple of days or actually tomorrow is the anniversary of the CrowdStrike outage, which happened about a year ago, and it was a bad installation procedure. There was something wrong in one line in the installation, and it took down about 8.5 million Windows boxes around the world. And so things like this, it's not just in the language sector, but the language sector itself is affected by all of these technologies. The same issues, the same errors can really do a number, as you were just saying, on a company's reputation or brand or products.
And I'm always amazed. I mean, you've probably seen this, throughout your career. I'm always amazed, like if you take a look, I mean, I always wondered about this. If you take a look at any company, it doesn't matter big or small, and you ask, big actually it makes more sense. But if you ask, like, what is the, where does, the localization or translation or language services sit in terms of your spend? And if you were to categorize, or you take all your spend, put them in a spreadsheet and sort them, where does translation sits? And it generally sits toward the bottom. Like, it's the smallest spend in any large organization, but it seems to be like the most targeted because it's not a commodity. Technology has a solution, and it seems to be targeted all the time. Do you feel that?
And it's targeted at the highest levels of a company, and for that matter, governmentally as well.
Yeah.
This year, English became the official language of the United States after a couple
Yeah, we heard that.
centuries. Yeah. So,
So what
and
happened if you speak another language in the U.S. right now? What happened?
well, I don't know. Maybe we'll have the same results as that train in the Belgian train in the Netherlands, where somebody said "welcome" in the wrong language in French, and the Dutch speaker was very upset, and he won a judgment against the railroad. So, the big problem though is there's in the States, I'll speak solipsistically here, surrounded as I am by many of my fellow Americans. There's 67 million Americans who don't speak English as their first language. And so there's a major requirement, and this has been recognized, throughout, the last.
That's a big percentage, Don. That's
It's
almost 25%.
yeah, it's almost what, more than half of Canada.
Yeah,
Oh no,
Don,
it's
more than half Canada.
50% again of Canada. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, these people aren't getting, if you don't translate into their language, they aren't getting able to take advantage of the opportunities in the country. So whenever I get a mailing from my health insurance company, it's in 20 languages, which is great. And I go in and there's interpreters available. Someday that may not be available, that kind of capability. When I'm on the beach in Florida, it's interesting. You'll see big signs about watch out for the tides in English, but not necessarily in Spanish. And you'll see a little, actually, there's at the flip side of that recently, there was a big sign about enjoying the beach in English. The sign about riptides was in Spanish, but you didn't have the riptide sign in English. So maybe that was a subtle message to the English first crowd. But
Absolutely. I don't know, man. You see these things in every country, and every one of them sends a different signal, I guess.
yeah. Well, the
But you're
thing
right.
is,
There's no consistency.
yeah. But let's put aside healthcare and things like that for a second. Just the essentials. And you say, okay, I want to go to Walmart, and or to the drugstore. If they don't take into account the fact that they have a community of foreign language speakers, they're not going to do business. So fundamentally, language is an issue of commerce, not just politics. It's an issue of not of diversity, but of commerce. If you want to sell to people who speak a different language, whether they're tourists or residents, you have to speak in that language. When I go up to Quebec, I'm embarrassed. My I'd love to be able to speak in French. I can read the signs well enough, and I know when to slow down, and I know where not to go. I can read the menu, but I can't converse. I'm in a foreign land, and that's uncomfortable for me. I'm accustomed in my languages that I've spoken to be in a place where I can understand. I can't really enjoy the place unless I know that language. And so I've seen the numbers for tourism down in the United States substantially this year as a result. So it's not only the language, but it's an attitude towards national origin.
That's right. That's right. It is just that signal that sends, right? The welcoming signals that sends. Similar to any product nowadays, you can arguably say that most of my products or all my products information is English, and if you don't speak English, you can't buy my product. Some people may say that, but what does that do to your product? You're now cornered into a single segment of potentially who could buy that. I mean, that's changed, back from 20, 30 years ago, and that's gone away now. And tourism is one of them too, by the way. Now, question for you. I know we did some prep yesterday, and this is not new to you, but I'd love to hear your take. The audience would love to hear your take on this one. There is, as you know, you guys did the analysis or did the statistics on this an industry, and there's about 19,000 companies, give or take. I'm not sure if the numbers are still there. 19,000. They may have declined to 18, or may gone up to 20. I have no idea. But in that range, there may be like around 18 to 20,000 companies in our industry. What do you say to the people that they are still skeptical about using AI? Is the resistance futile at this point?
Sort of, we could pun on this, saying that the resistance is futile. You will be AI assimilated. So, I think it's futile at this point. And here we are. This isn't something we've talked about, but I think we're both aware that we are living in the 21st century. A lot's going on around us that is interesting and fascinating. We're still not flying at the speed of light on to holidays, but we do have what's arguably the universal translator. From Star Trek, from the 25th century or whatever. It works pretty good for most of what you have to do on a regular basis. I wouldn't stake my life on it in a health and or emergency situation. Well, actually, maybe an emergency situation I need it, but it is something that works. And for lots of executives, it's an argument. It's a business case that has to be made. Is why should I keep these people around? These medieval translators using quill and ink when I could just put it through a machine and everything is miraculous and it comes out the right way in the right language. Well, that's an argument which is tough to deal with, and to a large degree, we have to acknowledge that it's a lot easier with machine translation, a lot better than it was 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So it's improved, and with large language models, it's accessible everywhere, and it's being built into so many products. Apple now has Speak and Say, and in the phones, and so the net of that is that's the argument you have to go against. Why should I invest in this? AI, you can go in and say, well, it doesn't do this right. It's ethically corrupt, or it's biased, or it gives the wrong answer. But in a lot of the cases, it doesn't. So I think what everybody has to do here is, let's get back to this 21st century. You look around and you say, okay, there's lots of technologies, lots of professions that have been affected by automation over time. When was the last time you talked to let's say a travel agent to make your flight arrangements? That's a pretty easy. Yeah, and when was the last time you actually got to talk to your financial advisor directly? You're going through the chatbot all the time on that, or talking to somebody in Lower Slobovia who in a call center. So those things have gone sort of south, so to speak. So I think what everyone in their profession has to do is just step back and say, in this profession, you're a knowledge worker, and the knowledge that is being automated at this point is this ability to take something from this language and put it in this language. And that at this point is not one of those, in this context, and I'm a linguist by training. I've spoken other languages pretty fluently at various times in my life, and I live off of translated literature. I love belletristic stuff, and that's come from other languages. Just so much stuff that I could read in other languages maybe, but I don't have the time. It takes me longer. So that's the background here. The reality is translators, interpreters, they can all benefit from this technology. And the challenge to them is to say, okay, where can I get some advantage out of this? And if you look just over the last 30 years, that's 3 decades, that's a lot of time. In that time, we've gone from where we had language aids, things that, I've got a stack of dictionaries behind me on my grammar wall. And that's that side, one stack, that side. And and for languages that may not even do not exist anymore as well. Some things that I studied in the past. So you've got those dictionaries. I could just go to the shelf and get the words, and everything was in there, and I'm on my way. You've got the next level, which was okay. That was aided by those things. Now it's assisted. You've got the technology which is on the machine, so it was term bases and translation memory and all of that stuff that would say, okay, I've seen this before. Has anyone else seen it? Boom, I got it, and it's in there. I don't even have to think about it. And we see that in Siri or Alexa or whatever, where it's fleshing out stuff. If you're going to say, I'm going to it might suggest store, given the context of the. So that's happening on an everyday basis. The next level we identified probably already 8 or 9 years ago, which is augmented translation. And what that's about is where the translator is sitting not at the, some people call it the, let's say, human in the loop. I quickly dismiss that as the human in the loop is at the end of the loop, sweeping up the garbage at the end. You want the human at the core of this thing. This person is expert in what's going on. And the technologies from the translation desktop tools and web-based tools that we've seen over the last 10 years, them all, it's Lilt, SmartLing, that crowd is, they're putting that human sort of in control, running the operation. So he or she is sitting there saying what goes, what doesn't go, making corrections along the way. The next level, and this is the one we're entering into now with some trepidation, is the automated part of this, where so much of this can be automatically done. It's seen it before, it knows the context, it thinks it knows the context. We'll still need the human at the core there managing it. But these are the things that the language industry has to understand. This isn't anything really new. We've just gone through this progression of things to where it's gotten to the point where it's a real aid. And we can say that you can arguably translate a lot more content. Scale is important because there's so much. We do a periodic study based on IDC's global data sphere. How much of the content generated on a daily basis is actually translated at all into any language? And it's like microscopic. It's point and then like 6, 7 zeros. And this can't take into account all the content that's ever been created before that's never been translated. So there's this enormous backlog of and front log of stuff that isn't translated. So what you want to do is be realistic, be strategic. Which of the content here absolutely needs a human's eyes on it all the time? Which of the stuff is less critical, less risky, where you can say, okay, I feel pretty comfortable putting the I've got a new scanner for 35 millimeter slides for get rid of several thousand of those. And you say, okay, which of this stuff is going to be good enough to translate that user's manual? And I've used Perplexity instead of read the manual, because it goes off and reads the manual for me and comes back and tells me what I need to do. So I'm using this effectively. I'm not even reading the English. I'm reading the summary from a machine. And so it's how can you make yourself better and more effective?
Yeah, that's right. And focus on the area where you can have a higher rate of return on.
Right.
And that's and for the audience, when, Don says, he was a linguist before, he's very humble. And Don he's got a PhD from Brown University in Slavic linguists. Linguistics, and also he's got an MA in Russian language literature from University of Albany. So we're in the presence of greatness here when it comes to linguistic background. Nevertheless, the overall visibility of the industry. So this is a great success story. Some of our translators, they formed a box and they're happy with that, and this is their world. That's what they live in, which is fine. By if this is somebody's happiness, nothing against that. Some people, such as yourself, decided I'm going to use those studies, what I've learned, what I've accumulated from a knowledge perspective, and do a higher impact outside of the day-to-day grind of translating kind of thing. So
my day-to-day grind would have been boring. Undergraduate students in obscure topics. But at the end of the day, really the thing is my academic background, besides the understanding of language, I also had the privilege of having as my thesis advisor, Henry Kuchera, and as one of my mentors, Nelson Francis. They at Brown had created the Brown corpus in it was in the 1960s. That was the first large-scale electronic corpus, and it's been behind so much of the natural language processing work. It's the foundation for statistical learning techniques. It's just a powerful engine. It's also become the core of any corpora that have been created for governments or particular sectors. And so this is work that was being done. Do the math. It's like 70 years ago, and maybe not. Yeah, about that long ago. And it's had that effect. And you look at machine translation, which had its first instantiation in 1954, I think it was, with the Georgetown IBM experiment. So these technologies have been around. They've been in the background for a long time. And there's been a lot of people working hard to improve the understanding of knowledge, not just the understanding of knowledge in other languages. So it's not just the translators, but a whole crew of phenomenal natural language processing scientists, computational linguists, and very smart linguists working in the space in areas like terminology and phonology and other ologies in this space. So it's
I love that.
yeah.
Other ologies.
Well, ideology is the latest one. So
That's a very nice one. I like that. That's good. So one of the question that always comes up. I mean, you can hear the noise around you because like as soon as you log into LinkedIn or you open any one of those newsletters that you receive, there you can see the conversation, the noise around certain topics. One of the I want to ask about this one is the language model gold rush. Did it reach its peak?
Yeah, I think it's right now a kind of arms race among all of the players, and the goal is for one of them to either put the others out of business or to so far exceed what the others have done that it becomes the gold standard. But a couple of years ago, Aurel Lamel, one of my colleagues, another linguist, but as a matter of fact, he also has a doctorate in ethnic musicology, I think is. So you can see there's a lot of variation in the backgrounds of people in this space. In any case, he and I wrote this report on the ethics of generative AI. And one of the things that we focused on at the time was actually focus. We said wrote at the time that the large language models at a certain point would just become kind of so bloated or bloviated that they were trying to serve the needs of everybody. And when that happens, you really don't serve the needs of any particular audience very well. So we said that we'd be moving more towards a focused large language model. So not trying to boil the ocean of knowledge and everything going on, but instead to say, okay, in this particular area, like pharmaceuticals, to use your example, or electric vehicles, just whatever it is, here's everything that could possibly be asked about this thing, and we are, dead set on ensuring that we're categorically expansive and complete in this space. And that's the direction that we see it going, because what you want to do is you think about all of the potential challenges to your business, to your content, to whatever you're doing, and you have to say that this has to be legally compliant. This has to be authentic. This has to be accurate to the nth degree. And you really can't do that for all knowledge in the world. You have to zero in on something. So
pick and choose, yeah.
That's the direction we see it going. And that's a big opportunity if you think about it for the language sector. If you've been working, let's say in, again, pharmaceutical as your stack, the place where you really excel and you know your way around, you can walk into Pfizer or Merck and get to the lab right away. You've been there before. That knowledge that your company has, and this is instantiated in your term bases, in your translation memories, in any knowledge graphs that you've created, in any of the metadata floating around that informs what you're doing in the processes and the legal regulations. This is a business. This is a real strong focus that you can bring to the market. And that's one of the areas that we encourage companies to move in, to get that level of knowledge and expertise.
And to deepen that expertise into their models, is that what you mean?
Right, and to take what they already have and then turn that into their front door, into their advertising. That this is what we're about. We know more than anybody about this topic. And the same thing goes for individual linguists. If you sit there and you say, okay, I have this conversation whenever I talk about what I do, at family parties or whatever, for the last 10 years, it's been, this machine translation stuff. Why do you even have to study this? And, for what they do, what they understand, they've got a point, because all they see is the output for, a user manual if they use it. But what you've got is this reality of localization. The first step is to say, okay, can somebody read it? Is it in Dutch? Or is it in Vlaams? Or, pick your favorite language. Can you identify the language? That's a big thing. Okay, first thing. So then you say, okay, it's got to be in this language, so it has to be in these languages. That's the first step. The next step is it local? Can this legally be sold in a particular market? So that gets into an array of governmental regulations as well as business practices. If I sell it, am I selling it in euros or drachma? And that has an impact. And what are the international regulations that matter? And then the last category we've called hyper-localization or hyper-personalization, which is basically, this starts to appeal to me, Don DePalma, and my set of issues, where I live, what I understand, how I think, and that gets into this real strong cultural ethos, and starts getting more into what are the politics of this person? What do I have to be aware of? What can I say? And that's something where if you can't build a business or build your reputation around your ability to really get into the heads, this is getting into psycholinguistics and the cultural, political, linguistic nexus that everybody deals with. If you can't get into that, if you can't create a business around that, then you're going to have a real tough time moving forward, because that first level, just getting it into Vlaams, it's not enough.
No.
Getting into the head of a Flemish speaker, that's a very different story.
That's right. You got to understand how they think, what do they expect, what makes them wanting more information or exploring a little bit more about the product and services that you're trying to sell. Now, let's take this to another flip side of that coin. Now, this is looking internally. What we just talked about is looking internally into our industry and trying to evolve and move to the next level in terms of service offering. Where do we make sense? How to deepen our services? From a buyer perspective, are we through the AI buzz, do you think? Or, there's still some, are the customers asking the right questions? Are they really investigating that whole AI thing? Or are we still, the hype still winning in some cases?
It depends on the sophistication, maturity of the buyer. The ones who have been around for a while, they know that this is a capability which is valuable on some fronts, but has clay feet on others. There's places where it falls apart. So going you have to know there's one of my favorite musicals is The Music Man. And I don't know if you know it, but if you haven't watched it, it's from this American movie. It's an American movie from the 50s. You can see it. And there's this guy who sells boys bands in the Midwest in the 19th century. And he takes a lot of grief about that. And finally, somebody says, you got to know the territory. You have to know who the audience is. And, that's just a classic sales and marketing saying. If you don't know who your audience is. So anyone who's selling to that, any audience other than the really sophisticated ones is going to have to figure out what their pain points are. What are the things that bother them? What keeps them up at night? What would be the benefit of moving forward in these other technologies? And, there's a lot of snake oil being sold now. I was at a board meeting recently for Condo, and they came in with this brand new functionality in the property management system they had. And all it was labeled, whatever the company's name is, AI whatever, and bringing AI to property management. It was business analytics from like I would have seen in the 1990s, but now labeled as AI because they could get it under the covers. It was easy enough. So you've got to watch out for that, as well as the argument now that to the other side of the coin that quality doesn't matter. We're starting to hear that again. That what you it's an odd argument, but basically the metrics like linguistic quality assessment tools that get you 99.4%. That doesn't matter as much as KPIs like Net Promoter Score and various time spent on site kinds of things. And they're looking where those numbers are low rather than looking at the source or the root causes for why those numbers are low. So you can pretty much anticipate that if you get a wrong translation at some point, that's going to go in the wrong direction for a company, but it might not show up in those daily NPS scores. So so you have to watch out what's being sold in the market, and just AI is certainly being oversold, but there's a lot of certainly immature or not knowledgeable enough buyers who are giving into that, and so you have to realize that and give them the arguments on why that doesn't work.
Yeah. Hey, Don, on the I don't know where the CSA stands when it comes to the standards, like the whole ISO scene. Do you think standards and regulations are to play a role here in some of the stuff that we just talked about, quality and and all that, and the minutia that goes around where do you inject a human and not human, etc. So, what's your view on the standards role here?
Yeah, well, I've always been a strong advocate of standards coming out of the database and middleware world, where two things can't talk to each other unless they're ANSI or NIST or whatever the standard is compliant.
ANSI, I remember those.
Yeah, well, you couldn't get something from here to there unless you had the right protocol. You might as well be sending it off by telegraph. So I'll take this as it's an issue of quality really at the end, and I'd say the jury is pretty much still out on standards in this space. There's catch up happening now. I think new standards are finally being released to take into account the AI factor, so that's an important element. But standards that don't have any teeth, whether they aren't mandated or aren't being followed, or actually worse yet, are outmoded and consequently don't meet the needs of anyone. Those are bad things. So the standards bodies have to accelerate to, let's call it, to AI time, and get these things out more quickly than 3 or 4 years after the AI explosion has happened.
Yeah. Now on the standard side, I know like here there's a lot of discussion about standard because a lot of companies, they think if you push standard, that's a validation that you have a great quality because you're pushing standard hard. You're flagging this certification of ISO that you have, or many ISOs that you have on your website, etc. So that would be like your card of proof, if you will, that your quality has been stamped by all these ISO standards out there. I don't know. I mean, these jobs to a large extent are done predominantly by human with some technology assisted tools out there. Do you think this is valid? Do you think an ISO? I personally think like ISO does not guarantee quality at the same time, but I don't know, like where people like they invest so heavily. I've seen some companies invest so heavily in ISO. You think that life depends on it? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, there may be a large invoice or RFP that depends on it, and so indeed their financial life depends on it. And just being able to tick off the box is certainly enough in that respect. What you have to look at is how good are the outcomes with this tool. Whatever we're talking about, it's not just translation; it's anything. If what you get out of it meets the requirements, and those requirements are not just Is it good enough? But is it fast enough? Is it accurate enough? Does it can you meet the particular other compliance requirements for a company? So all of these things come in. It's a matrix of requirements. It'll start with ISO being mandated in a particular industry for whatever reason, but it can't be a garbage product.
No, no. Now, what's your read on? I know you guys have visibility to pretty much the entire industry, but what's your read? And this is, I think, is a bit more controversial question. May ruffle some feathers out there. Have the localization leaders in our industry been too reactive and not visionary enough, in your opinion?
I feel really strongly for localization leaders, and they tend to be, I'd say, super conservative. But that's because they've got a really tough job. They've got to deliver content that represents the brand in one of the many channels that it's represented. It could be in support, it could be in documentation for the products, it can be in marketing, branding, all of that kind of stuff. None of which is organized typically around a centralized pool of corporate assets tied to, okay, here's our brand and here's how it's represented, and here's the all of our standard terminology. You've got numerous groups inside an organization that are responsible for the content creation and transformation into other forms, and then pushing it out on the channels. So the localization leaders, they have to be aware of this going on, and they're justifying, or they're saying they have to meet customer expectations. That's what they have to do. But at the same time, they have to say, okay, it's not just going into the language, but it's about language, style, tone, nuance, culture, context, authenticity in that particular market, plus enterprise computing issues like I said, speed or variety of channels that it's going out on. So that justification has to happen as well. At the same time, they're looking at other technologies. So they've got a sunken investment, let's say, in TMS and term bases and translation memory. And now somebody's saying, well, evaluate the use of an LLM. Well, how? What are the resources? I've got everybody flat out on this thing. So at the end of the day, they've fought hard to get the infrastructure they have now, and now they're being asked without additional resources to evaluate other things. So it's a lot of them end up like deer in the headlights here, just stopped and uncertain about what to do.
Absolutely. Now, tell me a little bit. What's CSA Research status is right now? Any new updates? Any new events on the go? Maybe we'll put a bit of a plug for CSA at the end of the conversation.
Well, we've got some workshops going on. Excuse me. Now in this concept we've been writing about for the last and talking about a lot for the last 5 years. Global content service providers, which is this next wave. What happens to a language service provider in this age of AI? And we wrote a report actually at the height of the pandemic. When everything was shutting down, we just stepped back and said, where will things be? And we've been looking at this over the preceding few years. Now it's a pretty established model that a global content service provider is at that, call it the Ne Plus Ultra, that there's the highest you can go here in terms of offering a broad capability of services to enterprises that want to be global. So we've got workshops going on that. And of course, our regular reports coming out, various frameworks on what's happening on both the demand and supply side, as well as regular business confidence surveys that are coming out on the LSP side.
Absolutely. And, I still receive CSA updates every once in a while in my inbox. I appreciate that. Thank you guys for sending them, and the team, etc. So any other things that you think we should cover that we have not covered in the past couple of minutes here? And we still have a few minutes to go. So.
Well, we started out with government and translation, and I don't think that's a uniquely American concept. Other countries have this issue. I know we've got the UN in our backyard, and there's the European Union. You guys have in Canada have an in-government institution. So I think this is one of the things that's really, let's say, I don't want to say fascinating. It's going back to the beginning of the conversation here, the importance of language here in a society is really critical. I'd hate to see the point where, and I think everyone should start thinking about this, where language matters for them in their particular countries and their societies and their economies. And I think we're all going to have to, anyone who has some interest in this, I think this starts to become more of a communal issue for the sector.
Yeah, interesting. And you said something very interesting. We talk about it quite often. Is from the entire global content, previous content, and current content, and future content, the addressable market is a very tiny portion of the entire global content. Like we're not really translating, what is it, 5% of the content globally? I don't know. You've got the stats
It's
on this one.
0.00000.
There you go. So the upside of this, the opportunity, the piece of the pie is pretty large. If you were to address past content and existing, even if you address just existing content now, like don't go back 20 years ago, but just the existing content right now, if you apply the right strategy, I'm assuming the industry has a lot of upside, a lot of positivity going forward.
Yeah, if they can get to that level of helping people understand that they have the tools. In this case, I'd mentioned various metadata things.
Sure.
So to give some structure, content, authenticity, reality to this stuff. So it's not just an amorphous blob of stuff in a file cabinet, but instead it's all interconnected. And from that, you can create more and more knowledge. So, and the more information that's available in other languages means you can add more to this knowledge base. So we get to this epitome, hopefully. Well, hopefully we never reach the epitome, but we keep moving in that direction of increasing human knowledge and importantly, increasing human communication. That's the real core of what this industry does. When I wrote Business Without Borders, it was 2022 is when it came out, or 2002 when it came out. The first pillar of anything was remember that you're communicating with humans. It's not jabber between machines. What it is there's a Robin at that end and whoever your interlocutor is at the other end. And you each have a communication that you want to make, and it may be in very different languages and or very different mindsets. And this is where the industry can help.
Yeah, it's not a dry transaction. I agree. Like how we started the conversation should end in a human element of this business. It is not a dry transaction. It is not machine talking to machine. At the end of the day, we're trying to connect humans at the end of the line who needs to connect to other humans to solve a problem, to learn, to find out, to educate, to solve a crisis in some cases. So, I really appreciate the insight, Don. Always pleasure to see you, my friend. Good talking to you as always. Feel free to come back and say hello once in a while.
Well, I'll see you in episode 226 or something. So
that's right. Yeah. We'll do this on a frequent basis. We'll set the frequency together and we'll come in and we'll do another update. To the audience, I want to thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for having me, Robert.
Yeah, anytime, Don. I truly enjoyed the conversation, and stay cool in this warm weather that we're having on the east sides.
I'll do my best. You too.
Thanks so much. To the audience, if you don't mind liking and sharing this content as you see fit, we really appreciate your help. This is, again, a personal initiative by myself. It's not connected to anybody. It's not sponsored by anybody. I just enjoyed the conversation with the likes of Don and the rest of the influencers in our industry, the rest of the executives in our industry. So thanks so much, Don, for joining me today. I truly appreciate it.
Take care, Robin.
Don't leave, just hang in there.
Stay well.